I think one of my biggest mistakes early on was I was very impatient and I was wanting to see results straight away. And obviously in business and things like this, that's not going to happen. You have to sort of work away at it and test things out and learn. So definitely having that patience to believe and keep on going and not be afraid if things don't go right first time.
The biggest mistake I probably did was not get a quotation before asking somebody to do a job for me. So I'd say before going into something, make sure you know how much it's going to cost you and how long it's going to take.
When I was in New York, first couple of weeks in, my role was always to prep for like a big meeting with the board and the directors that are involved to give an update on where we're at with progress with property sales and rentals and things like that. So just pulling together all the relevant documentation for the people to be sat around the boardroom and talk through, okay, this is sort of the status update. So the meeting was at around 10 o'clock in the morning and I couldn't get things right in the way that they were printed. It was the most basic thing you've ever seen and delayed the meeting by about 2 hours. I never call them failures or mistakes. I always call them learnings. And the reason being for that is I try to treat everything as a positive. It's always while you're in the middle of it, it's tough to see it as a positive, and especially probably more so now than ever. Everything is a learning opportunity. And I think if you look at it from that perspective, you don't spend the time and effort to focus on why you made the mistake. Instead, you focus on the learning of how you won't do it again in the future.
When I was working in the Blair administration, I was responsible for the implementation of the school reforms. And we had a policy called Education Action Zones, which I don't think went at all well. And I think it was my responsibility. First of all, when it was publicly announced, for which I was responsible, the media got the wrong end of the stick. That wasn't their fault. That was my fault. Secondly, I then got tense about the implementation of the policy and I didn't have quite the right relationship with the team responsible for implementing it. Thirdly, the politicians were now skeptical about it because it had created a lot of bad headlines and it just never quite got going. So that's an example of a mistake that I'd rather not have made. The big plus was, though, we learned from that mistakes and designed a new policy, which did work really well because we'd learned from mistakes. So as with anything, when you get something wrong, you need to try and correct it.
I had some work experience when I was 17 at a company called Prime Focus. I don't know if they're still called Prime Focus now, but they're a big post-production house. They were working on converting Star Wars into 3D and all kinds of other things. And I was making the coffee. I was a runner. And I had to take these cafetières and these lattes on this tray up to one of the editing suites. And I got into this lift and I just slipped. It slipped out of my hand and everything smashed in this lift. And then the lift doors open and the owner of the company was stood there and just looked at me and he just burst into laughter. And guess what? We ended up having a conversation. And then he recommended Queen Mary and my degree and everything. Sometimes you make mistakes and it can lead to an interesting conversation too. I think failure is the greatest teacher.
I was internalizing a lot of pain and hurt from football. I still hadn't come to peace with what had happened. And when I was given a written warning and it came to my house and I actually hid it from my parents, I actually thought to myself, if I get sacked from a job, I'm really going to be in trouble here. I've spent 12 months finding a job. I've got one. I'm still upset with what's happened. I've now basically been given, a metaphorical slap on the wrist. And if I don't buck up my ideas, I'm going to be in real trouble here. And it then sank with me. Do you know what? I've really got to roll up my sleeves now and get involved.
I'm a big fan of reaching out. I think it's massively important to be proactive in reaching out to people. And one of those things nearly gave me a life-changing opportunity. What would have been my fourth client with web design was just inches away from being a famous rapper. His name is Tyler Yahweh. He was on tour with Post Malone, which I'm sure most of the people watching this will have heard of. he put up a post on his Instagram story saying, "Are there any web developers?" I reached out to him, and lo and behold, I ended up consulting with his manager, and we worked through multiple variations of his web design in return for backstage tickets to a show that they were doing in Glasgow. So there was a lot of communication. We built a couple variations of the website. We got in touch about 10 days or something like that before they were due to go on tour, and the website needed done for the tour. So I even took days off school just to go into. I was still at school at this time, right? Crazy. Boom, like that, I got ghosted. So the manager just went cold turkey. They were on tour. You can imagine what it's like, that lifestyle, right? They were in America at the time, and they ended up having to use the website, which they showed me that they had at the beginning, that they wanted to improve from. They ended up having to use that because we simply couldn't get the process done. But even with a knockdown so big as that, I still took the positive from it, that, you know, I was consulting with Post Malone's manager and working on something kind of as incredible as that, all while still being at school, all while still being 16 years old. And then kind of, again, that's one of those outreach lessons where because I got a response from someone so big, I just keep moving forward and reaching out to, you know, as many people as I can.